Hey guys, and welcome to the Results Loading podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm your host, Michael Atkin, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Ryan Radomski, co-founder of Omega DB. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Ryan, I want to dive right in here. Can you talk a little bit about your background? I understand you've more or less seen a lot and been involved in several startups and entrepreneurial projects. And that you first started coding when you were 9. Can you tell us a little bit about your come up and entry into the professional world?
Yeah. It starts, for me, it starts way back. It was never really, coding has never been like a professional pursuit of mine. For the first, I think it was like 9 years, pretty much. I literally never got paid for a single line of code I'd ever written from 9 years old till I think it was 18 when I got my first professional job. And that was very surprising, actually entering into the market, because really those first 9 years, I didn't stick with one single project. It was like one new thing every 2 weeks. Like this week, I want to write a compiler, and it wouldn't be a big compiler. It'd be just, a couple lines, just basically a proof of concept. I want to write a programming language. I want to make like a kernel or an operating system. I want to figure out, how bootloaders work. I'm curious about compression. I'm curious about mathematics, symbolic computation, every single programming paradigm. So every single week, it was like a new thing. And so I had quite a breadth of experience. And what I found with that, which was really surprising, was the breadth started making a lot of familiar patterns. And so I got to a point where nothing was new to me in the programming world. And I could speak to that a little bit later of really how basically exploring actually created depth in and of itself. Like the depth just came from the breadth, which is sort of counterintuitive. And there's probably some deep philosophical reason I can't speak to about why that happens. But really everything just becomes familiar. I got my first job when I was 18. I was at Iowa State University. And they needed a PHP web developer for this centralized IT department. And by the time I got to the job interview, I had realized that the world was not what I thought. It really wasn't. The professional world wasn't what it was going to seem, what it seemed, or this idea that I had in my head. As soon as I got that first job, they asked really basic questions on the interview process. And I figured, okay, a lot of the people applying, they might have just seen programming for the first time. Because a lot of my friends have only seen it when they turned 18, versus me, I've been doing it for 9 years. But what I realized was that there were other people at this company, once I eventually started the job, who have been programming for 15 years, 20 years. But they've always stayed in this narrow stack. It was the same exact technology stack, same language, same database, same thing, day to day. And what I noticed was that there was a lot of there was sort of just like this lack of broader context that basically a degree I don't think would ever get you. So that was really surprising for me. We started building a lot of university websites, some more complicated than others. We built what I told was the nation's first fully automated tutoring system, at least for a public, state university like ours. And it was a decent experience, but it was definitely very surprising. Then I moved on to an internship at Thomson Reuters, where it was kind of much the same. They picked my resume out of a pile because I had programmed in Scala, I've used Apache Spark and Hadoop, and basically all the weird things that all of our mentors, all the people that were prepping our resumes, told me not to put on the resume. They said, don't put Lisp, don't put Scala, don't put all this weird stuff. Ironically, now I actually look for all that when I look for resumes myself, when I'm hiring people. And I actually stumbled upon this Paul Graham article about back in the day, he used to hire Python developers back when Python was kind of like a weird esoteric language. So he actually picked them because he knew that their background was hobbyist developers. And he actually specifically picks hobbyist developers himself. He calls them basically hackers. And he has a whole book about it, Hackers and Painters, about describing what he means by that. And so I noticed much the same. There was a guy, he was my mentor. He had been programming there for 25 years, only Java. And then he would try to transition to Scala, and it was was actually really difficult for him. And doing distributed computation was especially difficult because there's a certain way of thinking when you're programming one computer versus programming 1,000. And so a lot of the old stuff that you kind of get used to that you want to carry over, you can't carry it over. And you just have to learn to like let go, which for me was never really much of a challenge because there was nothing I was ever holding on to. I never had any baggage. I was just, I had tried a new thing every single week. And so to me, a lot of this felt familiar, but for somebody who's been doing the same thing for 25 years, unfamiliarity is a very relative concept. So it was a really interesting experience there as well. Transitioned on into a professional career shortly thereafter. And, that's when basically my 9-to-5 jobs ended. I worked my first 9-to-5 for about 8 months, right in the peak of COVID during lockdown. I was working from home. I was really interested in The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It was a book I had read in college when I was going through a really dark time, and it made me more motivated than basically any of my friends' advice, any of my family's advice. That one book just really like lit a fire for me. So I was very motivated by some of the things that were talked about. And one of them was actually hiring virtual assistants, or basically doing sort of a geo arbitrage, finding work in the United States and outsourcing it overseas. And a lot of people think of this as something that, maybe like big four accounting firms, insurance companies, banks do. But there's nothing preventing just the common everyday person from doing that as well. So me and my roommate, Michael, the other co-founder of Omega DB, we had this idea, which was that we'd hire a programmer overseas and we'd start doing freelance work on the side. And so we basically experimented around with this, looked at a few resumes. We liked the prices, of course. And then I started telling all my friends that I was starting a software consulting agency. And we made this really nice looking website. I mean, we had 5 different departments. We had different email addresses, sales at the Lambda Group, jobs at the Lambda Group, billing at the Lambda Group, support at the Lambda Group. We had this big, banner on our website that had this massive office building. And you go to the website and, we weren't necessarily saying we had all these employees, we had this or that or the other thing, but you just get an impression like this was a really big software development agency. And so we started, basically reaching out to all our friends saying, hey, we're starting a software development company. And we were doing all this while we were still working our day jobs. And then really that was like the first breakthrough. And I noticed that career progression for me is really just a long series of breakthroughs that might happen every 6 months or 12 months. Where nothing ever seems to be going anywhere. And then you just have this like one big eureka moment where everything starts clicking. And so that was the first thing that made things start clicking. We started basically outsourcing development work and doing freelance stuff as a software agency. And so from there, we started building apps for friends. We started finding work from, I have a friend that's pretty deeply rooted in like the hip hop industry. And he had, he just put our agency on his vendor list. So that's the first time I learned how that worked because I had been a programmer my whole life. And we started getting a bunch of work from different, basically, what do you call them? The production companies that would set up like big concerts and big festivals and stuff like that. We were doing quick website work over here, a little app over here, just a bunch of stuff on the side, trying to figure out how business worked. And we literally just came into it, again, completely exploratory. We had I read a few books, but I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a coach. I didn't know what I was doing. And then we started working with one of my other friends who just so happened to work for this YouTube influencer in the finance space. His channel is called Financial Education. And he had this really big Discord group going on at the time. And it was a massive operation. There was about 60,000 people in this Discord, and he wanted to basically build a Discord bot. So my friend introduced me to their COO, and he liked basically our mindset. He liked the way we thought. He liked the way we were approaching things. And so we just kind of clicked, and then he started hiring us for this Discord bot. And this was kind of this led on to the next eureka moment in my career. Once we built this Discord bot, this got me to be introduced eventually to this YouTuber guy. And then he had basically a secret plan. He was hatching this project. He didn't want to tell anybody about it. He was teasing it a little bit online, and everybody in his company, which, by the way, there were about 90 people in his company. It was a bigger operation than you might otherwise guess. And this huge sales team, and they were doing coaching, and they were doing all these other different businesses on the side of this YouTube thing. And so they were launching this secret project, and he mentioned that he was doing it with Graham Stephan. And I was like, this was the first time that I was 1 degree of separation from somebody basically I had heard of. I'm like, oh, I actually know who that is. That's a little bit peculiar, because not like 3 months ago, we were basically just doing these little WordPress sites for production companies or whatever we could find, trying to figure out how a business worked. And then all of a sudden, there was this like really big secret opportunity, and we had no idea what it was. So I start interviewing with him. We're talking late night to 3 a.m., 5-hour conversations, over and over and over again. I get his personal phone number. He's like, I want to fly you out to Las Vegas. I'm like, what is going on here that I'm getting all this VIP treatment? More of that would come later in my career, but this was the first time being exposed to anything like this. So I fly out. We spend basically a week together.
Michael go with you?
No, that first time I think I went alone, because he had been basically somebody that I had been talking with, on the phone. So this is really like, basically like deep, intimate one-on-one relationships. And it's not the kind of stuff where like you'd have like a bunch of people in a conference room or anything like that. Like I'd always start everything off on the phone, talking with people and forming that one-on-one connection. So I flew out on a solo trip.
But Ryan, this is all through Lambda, right? Is Lambda and Omega are not the same thing?
They're not the same. So these 3 years feel like an eternity to me as well, just because of all the stuff that had happened. So after this Vegas trip, he's telling me about all of his ideas. We start thinking about different companies we could form together. We start talking entrepreneurially, but we're talking in, again, sort of this exploratory mindset about what we could do in the future, all these different directions we could go, all the opportunities, all of the network at his disposal. And of course, we had all the resources, considering he was pretty good at picking stocks. That's how he got popular on YouTube in the first place. So we started learning more about this project. And it's an app. It's an app that they called the Hungry Bowl. It was basically Yahoo Finance for Gen Z. And Graham Stephan was partnered on it, financial education, and Erica Kohlberg, Matthew Hugh, and some other financial YouTubers. And the game plan here was to get every single person that was an e-celebrity in finance to all basically join this platform and make it kind of like a Seeking Alpha, where they're writing articles. You're getting content in a brand new way. And so it was a way to get off of the platform of YouTube and monetize completely differently. So he says, let's fly you out to Vegas. I actually move. I threw all of my possessions in a dumpster. And Michael will tell you, it's a true story. Michael and I were roommates. I'm like, I'm moving to Vegas. Everybody in my personal life told me this is the worst idea I could ever make. And that fueled me even more. Everybody's like, this is the worst. You're going to regret this. This is crazy. You don't know this guy.
You have no choice. I mean, when you're in that kind of hungry initial mindset and everyone's telling you it's the worst idea, everything within you is telling you that's why I should do it.
This is another Tim Ferriss thing too. I was very motivated by it. This became my blueprint for basically my lifestyle, because he has this exercise called fear setting, where you actually write down in a matrix all the things you're afraid to do. He always says it's better to decide your fears than your goals, because people make a million excuses to not actually pursue their goals. But it's better just to talk about what you're afraid of. And so I was afraid of moving to Vegas. It made me very nervous to think about this. And the thing is, what you do is you talk about ways to mitigate this. You talk about the worst case scenario of what could happen. And then the third column is, what do you actually lose by not doing it? What's the opportunity cost? And when you see them all side by side, it really starts to paint a picture where you can actually assess that you're biologically, we're very risk averse. If something bad could happen to us, it's like that path is closed off and I would never consider it. Even though the odds might be in your favor, if there's even like a slight chance that something bad might happen to you, people just don't do it. So this is what I did. I did the exercise. I thought about it. I'm like, there's a lot that my life could change by doing this. So I literally threw all my possessions away in a dumpster, showed up to Las Vegas in with a duffel bag.
Threw everything away as opposed to just keeping it in storage in case you wanted to come home or something like that.
Yeah, I wanted to move quickly.
Yeah, no time for moving. Just throw everything away, one-way ticket to Vegas, and go from there.
I didn't want to think about it. Well, also, I want to be a little bit nomadic, and I thought all my possessions would just weigh me down and prevent me from doing this kind of thing in the future. I'm like, well, if I can't do it once, I'm not going to be able to do it 100 more times. When the next opportunity pops up, I want to be, agile. So that was really the reason why I threw everything in a dumpster. Was I was like, this stuff's just going to hold me back from doing stuff like this. Like, I don't want, like, I'm going to go maintain this storage unit. That storage unit, I just thought of as baggage. Like, that's the thing that's holding me back from going where I want to go in life. So I showed up with a duffel bag. Yeah, I literally just had it's my old volleyball bag from when I used to play. I just put everything in my old volleyball bag and I'm like, all right, I'm here.
Yeah.
So I literally showed up with a bunch of clothes, get this apartment. It's completely empty. I'm sitting in the floor in the corner of my apartment. I'm like crying on the floor. I'm like, what did I do? I just turned my entire life upside down. By the way, when I got there, I was having problems with my lease because I was self-employed. And they asked for pay stubs. So I tried to make my own pay stubs. I didn't do it right, apparently. Still don't know how to do that. And so they got really mad about that. They got in a tizzy. So I'm sitting in an Airbnb next to the airport, and I'm hearing rumors that everybody in this Airbnb basically keeps a gun on them at all times. And my YouTuber friend, he drops me off, and he's like, "Hey, dude, you're in like a really sketchy area." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's not ideal." I'm sitting in this Airbnb. I think I was there for like 2 weeks. And I am calling all my friends, all my family members that told me not to do this, all the same people that told me this could be the worst idea of my life. And they're all like, they're having this like, I told you so moment. And I'm like, you know what, this became a theme in my life. So I figure it out. I get a lease, a different place. I had 2 options. It wasn't that hard to figure it out. Like every single crisis seems really bad at the time. And then you look back and you're like, that was like a 1-week fix. Like, I don't know what I was freaking out about. So I move into this new apartment. Now I got new challenges. I'm like sitting in an empty apartment, kind of depressing. I order like a mattress, and now it's like sitting up in the corner of the room with like a bunch of sheets on it. I'm like, this is literally like the male living space memes. Like this looks like a mess. And we start building. I'm showing up to. He had another house. A few other YouTuber people would show up there every now and again. We had like a news team. We had me, the development team. And we were planning on moving more developers out to this house as well. And I'm living there for 6 months, and my life got fun. It got so fun. I stayed with this friend for a little while too. I was just kind of like, I was just sort of meandering around in Las Vegas. Really, and Las Vegas of all places to do that. It was hilarious to me.
Yeah, who can blame you? At the end of the day, you're chasing your dreams. No one can knock you for that. No one can knock you for that.
They do. No, 99% do. That's what you find. The more tenacity you have, the more people tell you you're making a mistake. It's funny how that works out.
Well, it's funny in our world as business leaders and entrepreneurs and having involvement in startups. You find that a lot of people who are very comfortable in their 9-to-5 job end up kind of rooting against you. You really explained it perfectly just now. You're making a huge mistake. I told you so when it didn't go your way right away. People kind of knocking you for chasing a dream. And I think a lot of co-founders who attempt these startups really, really have a different mindset in terms of what they want their lives to look like and what's important to them. And so I think yours definitely an extreme story. I haven't heard a story like this yet. But I imagine you're not completely unique in the sense when it's like, yeah, against all odds, I did what everyone advised. I did the opposite of what everyone advised me to do. And the beginning wasn't great. And it ended up kind of working out. And I didn't mean to interrupt. I know you were just about to tell us how you started having some serious fun in Vegas. So I'll throw it back to you. But just wanted to throw in there, I think that's so typical for the co-founder mindset. It's like a mindset you have to have. If you want to be successful, you have to want it more. You have to want to go against the odds and against the advice of even mentors, family, parents, in order to really get what you want out here in this world.
You're literally staring into a void and you have no idea what's on the other side of it. There's just this event horizon, and you know that a lot of bad things can happen to you and a lot of good things can happen to you And as you get comfortable staring into that void and just taking the dive, you basically start building resourcefulness. And when bad things happen, you're like, this is a quick fix. I can figure this out. This is something Sam Altman, said, I think it was like 10 years ago. He had an interview with his brother when he was the president of Y Combinator. And he always said, every crisis is easier than the last. And as a founder or as an entrepreneur, you basically run into these on a regular basis, and they seem very scary at the time, but they get easier and easier and easier, and you start getting used to it. Like your reactivity just lowers.
Like you said, you just get used to it. You know, the first crises you deal with, maybe in the corporate world, you have an entire company backing you. But when you're out here on your own as a founder, all you have is yourself. And so those initial experiences can be daunting, more than daunting, because it's like, all I have is myself. How do I work around this? And exactly to your point, and to Sam Altman's point, of course, he's usually pretty on top of this stuff. The more crises you deal with, the better you get at dealing with them. You know, totally. Yeah. Eventually it becomes just like a daily occurrence, especially in startup world, when your morning could be going great, and then the afternoon you have massive implosions, and it's just another day at the office at that point.
Yeah, and to steal from Tim Ferriss again, he always says, this is something that I try to live by. This is my creed, which is your success in life is directly proportional to the sphere of your comfort zone, or the diameter of your comfort zone. As you increase your comfort zone, things like this will come. It's really just, basically it's when everybody tells you, I told you so, to pretty much ignore it and getting good at ignoring it, because I've been doing this for years now. And every story is crazier than the last. This is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of, the stunts I've pulled, and these basically these little fiascos I get myself into. And it all just turns out, and it all ends up turning into a massive network. And you start finding the world's a really small place. People that aren't afraid to try new things. It's not very many people that are actually pushing the boundaries like that. So you start running into the same people in a next life as you kind of go through your journey. People that you used to think were untouchable. Everybody's just like 1 degree of separation away now. As your network expands, as you do more, really, really crazy stuff, you start to feel that the world's a small place, and these crises are not what they seemed. And now my new biggest fear is basically going back to the comfort zone. I've completely flipped. My worst fear is to get a stable 9-to-5 job and miss out on the opportunities. The opportunities are the thing that keeps me going. But the idea of stasis and stagnation is now much more horrifying to me by orders of magnitude than just staying. The missing out is much more terrifying than the lack of stability that you find by pursuing different things.
It's like startup FOMO, if you think about it, because some days, and you touched on it, and we're dealing with it now. Some days are hard, man. They are emotionally draining. They take a lot out of you. And some days it's like you're trying to sprint up a mountain, and as you're making progress up the mountain is getting taller and taller as you make progress up the mountain. And it's like, man, this is next to impossible, but I can't quit now because I'll never forgive myself. And to your point, it's that startup FOMO. My greatest fear is missing out on something that is potentially fantastic. And maybe you're on the 1 yard line and you don't know it yet. And you just need that one breakthrough that you were discussing earlier. And it can change the whole game for you, because I think for me, being in the startup world for almost a year now, there are days when it's like, man, it's tough. I mean, no one told us it was going to be easy, but it really is true. But you can't ever let it go, because once you get a taste of what success could look like, especially after something that you built yourself, there's no way you can go back to that 9-to-5 world. There's no way, because of that fear of missing out on something potentially amazing, like you said.
Yeah, and it really, this just did wonders for my agency. I fixed the empty apartment problem because I had met a girl. She had way too much furniture, and I had a 2-bedroom apartment. So we filled the whole thing. So I didn't buy a single I never bought any furniture this whole time I was there. I think I bought a table and maybe some chairs, but that was, so I could go eat my food that I'd order from like DoorDash or whatever. And then, I move her in. We are now, fully furnished. And actually, my apartment's looking pretty good because her job was Instagram. And at the whole time that I was in this Vegas, cohort of people, I was really the only person I knew that didn't do social media for a living. So she made her money off of Instagram. These other guys made their money off of YouTube, and they post how much money they earn online. It's far more than you could get by basically getting a PhD and being a data scientist or something like that. Even those engineers at OpenAI, they make $1 million a year, and that might be the cap, or somewhere thereabouts. Whereas, these people that are doing social media that they haven't gone down the beaten path are doing tremendously more than that. The numbers were really, really bizarre. And the side businesses were even bigger than the YouTube for a lot of them. I think Graham owned like a bank.
He owned a bank, like
I forgot the name of it. Yeah, I think he's like some minority shareholder in a bank startup. Whoa. And then financial education, he also had his coaching business on the side, which was doing incredible numbers, even compared to YouTube. So it was really interesting to see that. Not to mention my girlfriend, I take a photo of her, and it'd be like a 15-minute photo. We'd have like 5 sponsors. Like, she's got like a certain dress, she's got a certain bouquet, like a certain hair extensions, and it's like 10 grand for like 15 minutes of work. And I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, 10 grand for like a month is pretty good for a 9-to-5. But in 15 minutes doing Instagram, you could make, you could work like 2 hours a week and make 6 figures. Like, it really, you don't have to do anything. Just show up and put the right dress on, get the right sponsor. And if you know what you're doing, you could really make a living with substantially less time and effort involved once you find these creative outlets. So that was eye-opening. That was also a good introduction to the celebrity world through her, because basically every third celebrity I can name, she had met them at some point. And so this was very eye-opening. Meanwhile, Graham and Jeremy, the YouTubers, they also had these global networks. Everybody had these global networks. I did not have a global network, but I saw what a global network could do. And having, knowing a lot of people that are household names was very interesting to me. Eventually that didn't work out. Unfortunately, with the app, they didn't want to fundraise. The whole thing was paid out of pocket. It cost a tremendous amount of money to keep that thing up and running. Absolutely a tremendous amount. And the other businesses as well were also very expensive. So there was a belt tightening period, and I didn't want to stick around for it. So I did the same thing. I just packed my bags. I packed all my stuff into my car, just drove home. And this is really the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario was putting all my stuff in my car and driving home. And it was a snowstorm. It was terrible. I had BMW sports tires in a snowstorm driving home. I was sliding off the road. I had to stop in Utah, get snow tires. And I got tires in the back of my car. And it's like, I don't know. It's just not that bad. It's just not that bad. I stayed in a hotel overnight, waited the snow out, drove on my merry way. I was back home, stayed with a friend for a little while, got my own apartment in like 2 weeks. It's like, it's really not that hard to deal with this stuff. When stuff hits the fan, it's not really that big of a deal. When you look in hindsight, it was like, that was a 1 week fix. That was a 1 day fix. That was an overnight in a hotel fix. Like, it's like, I got a continental breakfast in the morning. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. It was overcomeable. No. And I think it's a great point to make, because there's so much anxiety, especially with like the up and coming generations now. And, compared to back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, they call it a simpler time. I think a lot of anxiety is prevalent in, people close to our age, and, having to spend the night in Utah, or having to slide off the road, or, being caught in Vegas and with just a mattress on the floor can be really, really daunting to a lot of people. And it's a great point that you made to kind of take a step back and think, you know what? Wasn't that bad. I was able to kind of do some problem solving, some quick problem solving. My life wasn't in danger. I wasn't on the streets. I wasn't starving. You step back, you figure out how to deal with it, and you move on. And that mindset translates really well into the startup world, I think too, because we're constantly faced with issues, whether they're big, they're small, anything in between. We're constantly faced with that adversity, and learning how to just take a step back, take a breath, and deal with them head on is one of the most powerful lessons I think you can learn from, especially in this world. When you don't have the backing of a huge corporation, when you don't have, 15, 20 man teams, it's just you out there. And for you, Ryan, who's kind of on this Vegas adventure, and now you're on your way home and you're kind of being dealt these hit or miss cards every, new decision you make. It's okay. I mean, it's just life, and you deal with it and you move forward. And it's the same thing in startup world. You're dealt, bad cards. You have a bad Monday. You take a step back, you deal with it, and you move on. You learn from it, and it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be anything more. So Ryan, thanks so much for being on the Results Loading podcast today. I really appreciate it. And good luck to you.
Thanks so much, Michael. It was a great conversation.